I think we're really noticing kind of in this last year, people are really this idea, I mean, you know, those of us who have been in DITA for quite some while, you know that we've been kind of, probably a lot of us have been pushing this message about getting out of PDFs and into a kind of an online portal and so on. And, you know, for sure, some of us still need to provide print PDFs and so on. But I think that the whole idea of a kind of a one-stop shop for your online information is really actually starting to come together, and we're seeing increasing people doing that. I'm not sure if you got the chance to see the Deloitte presentation yesterday, but that was a fantastic example of this. And so obviously one of the things that we are doing with that is the content mashups, where you can get the technical content, if you like, or whatever you have in Tridion Docs, structured contents, alongside kind of marcoms from Tridion sites, right there on the same page together. Here's an example of what we did as our kind of internal demo that we use for this. And this is kind of, the way that we're doing this is really a best practice, I would say. It's based on taxonomy, so you're not kind of hard linking between the docs content and the sites content. It's kind of, if it's there, it will show up. If it's not, you're not going to get broken links. So we're pretty pleased with this and pleased with the traction it's getting and with the idea of knowledge hubs overall. And I think, you know, we are recognized that we have this delivery stack from kind of a really enterprise level web CMS. So we got that kind of scale, we got that security, enterprise kind of management capability, and it's very kind of flexible as well, that you can really build out your own experience on top of that. So that's kind of in the slot of kind of recent good things that we've done. I did want to look ahead already a little bit for delivery features, to say we are going to be working further on this to give a bit more of a kind of an out-of-box toolkit. It's always going to be important for people to design their own experiences. You know, it's not going to be this kind of like install it and you just get one flavor of portal or something. But we do want to give people a bit more of a kind of a toolkit with features, more features around kind of surfacing external content libraries. Is it libraries of PDFs? Is it video clips or whatever? Also want some features around sharing and bookmarking out of the box. And then very much the kind of things that I was talking about yesterday, working on that findability and navigation kind of a piece, and all driven by taxonomy. But I am getting a little bit ahead of myself, and this will come a bit more later, because I did also want to just go over some recent release highlights over the last couple of years. So content mashups are mentioned. I'm sure people will also be aware of the much faster publishing that we came out with last year, so up to twice as fast for content publishing. Streamlined content import. We've got the new version of Content Importer. It's a completely new UX, much nicer, much more efficient to use, but also the ability to use Content Importer for importing translated files. So to be clear, this is not where you have, for example, a world server integration or something. It's for people who are translating their files externally, but Content Importer makes it a lot easier to get those files back into the system. Also kind of gradually more and more productivity enhancements for technical authors. And a lot of this actually we pick up from the Community Ideas Forum, which we do very much read. I think we're getting better about also responding. We haven't always been brilliant, but we're getting better. But we do read those ideas and we pick up on them. And so things like, you know, ability to search for a publication and find it within Publication Manager, that's something that we prioritized and got in, as well as a number of other features. And then finally, Arbiter also mentions this draft space, which really fits in a bigger picture around what we're calling collective spaces overall. Excuse me. So last year at Connect, I presented a bit of the kind of the current or the past state about subject matter expert authoring and reviewing. And you had these kind of two sides to the picture, and neither of them very good with the kind of the regular tools that were out there. So in terms of authoring, you know, you had these very complex kind of technical authoring tools, and you really had to be a very trained technical author to piece together all these kind of bits of content Lego and understand what was going on. And then in terms of involving subject matter experts in authoring, traditionally it was all this kind of really constrained kind of an experience, almost a form-filling type of experience. Or at the most you get to kind of edit one data topic at a time. And it's kind of all disconnected. People who are used to thinking of things in terms of a flowing publication or a connected set of content, it's very kind of isolated and out of context and a little bit controlling. In terms of review as well, at least the SME authoring was in structure. In review, typically it wasn't in any kind of a structure, and many people were still kind of exporting PDFs or Word documents. It's one document that comes out, gets sent to 50 people, you get 50 documents back. You have to consolidate all of those comments. And particularly if you're a regulated industry and those comments, you have to do something. You have to prove that you've at least kind of taken them into account and addressed them properly. That's a big pain. I mean, a lot of people are managing these in a big Excel sheet or something, and it's a lot of effort. And it's not to say that there haven't been other online alternatives to this kind of centralized reviewing systems, and of course we've had our own as well. But I will say for all of those, they've been somewhat kind of buggy or at least unscalable. Unscalable either technically or unscalable in terms of the approach that they take. There is a common approach around, which is to kind of embed like review comments directly back into the source content. Great if you've only got a couple of reviewers. If you've got 50 reviewers, again, how are they all going to be operating on this thing at the same time? It's going to get to be a huge kind of mess, and you get those same kind of auditing problems there. So basically, we realized that people needed new ways of working, and this is what we've really been doing with collective spaces. So to paint this whole picture, there's various components in this. You have the draft space, and I'll show you a screenshot soon. Really, for all of this, this is a quick presentation today, but I would highly recommend that you go and see Sarah and Chip in the Innovation Center and get a demo if you haven't seen one already. It's a much better picture of how this actually feels in practice. But draft space, so this editing interface where instead of kind of the little chunks of content, you get to really work with more of a whole document kind of idea. So SMEs get some real power to substantially create and update and change the sequence of content. It's not to say that you don't still need your kind of power users, but I think the ratios are changing. This is what we're seeing in the markets, that generally people want to involve their engineers, their subject matter experts more and more. And this is what we are trying to model as well. To say the ratio is going to change, where you used to involve just a few SMEs perhaps, and you used to have this kind of small army of technical authors perhaps, it's going to swap around. So you still need some power users to kind of manage workflows, kind of do occasional kind of bits of manual XML tagging or whatever it may be. But really they're in the minority now. You still need them for now, and gradually we'll be looking to move this functionality from the thick clients into more of a web interface, kind of expanding the features in the browser-based interfaces. But for now you still need this. And then completing this triangle is these subject matter reviewers. These kind of experts all around the organization who may not want to write any content as such, but it could be your legal team, it could be various people in charge of the content accuracy and everything, and they all need to have their inputs that you need to listen to. And this is where we come in with our review space, which is exactly this place to suggest changes, check the resolutions, check what authors have done and are you happy with it, approve things, and it's all in this very centralized and reportable environment. So a quick screenshot of draft space. So the idea is very familiar to people used to working in Word, actually slightly simpler than some Word documents, I would say, slightly friendlier, all browser-based. You open it up just from a link, and you dive straight into a publication at the relevant point. You can see here we have a break in a topic, so it's this very smooth scrolling kind of view of a whole publication there. It's not to say, of course, that we expect people to be writing whole books necessarily. I just talked about the knowledge hubs, the online knowledge hubs, and I'm not contradicting myself here, but it just gives you a little bit more context of the surroundings here, and you get this kind of view of the outline as well, the table of contents, if you like, that you can move topics around in as an SME, all in the same view. And you can just click anywhere and start editing, and it will check it out automatically, and all of this kind of thing. So a quick sum up of some of the headline features there. There's kind of deep linking ability. Just send a link to somebody. It will open up that publication at the relevant topic. We have tested this with massive documents. We're doing kind of lazy loading to say it doesn't really matter, to be honest, how big your publication is. Just keep scrolling and it will load the relevant topics as you go through. Of course, you have these kind of very important things that you would have with DITA anyway, the ability to reuse content at the topic level, at the conref level, reuse images, upload new images, even create new versions of topics, which is very important. Somebody's locked down the old version. You as an SME know that you need to create a new version. That's in there, and so on. It's all very much based on the core of Tridion Docs itself. So if you're used to these concepts about statuses and properties and all of that kind of stuff, it's exactly the same. Uses the same template folders, same properties, same statuses, all driven exactly from that core Docs content management server. And the last thing, is pretty flexible in terms of how you input regular typing, or you can use the various on-screen keyboards for East Asian input. And it even works with kind of emoji keyboards, so if you're into that kind of stuff. So that's draft space. Review space, you see it looks pretty similar. This is actually the same publication. So it's using the same rendering. So you've defined kind of what you have in the content. It's using the same rendering here. But it's a tidier kind of interface, and you add all your comments in this right-hand side here. So comments and suggestions. And I don't want to go too much down in the weeds. As I say, please do check out the demo in the Innovation Center. But we paid a lot of attention to things like the ability to add various bits of metadata to your comments. This is very, very important again for regulated industries, for manufacturing and so on. You want to say, like, for example, this comment is a technical one, or this is purely editorial, and kind of filter them out by that. So you can add that metadata. You can create your own metadata, and so on. So very scalable again, same kind of principle, massive documents, it works. And then really large numbers of reviewers across the enterprise can all use this. It takes very, very little training to get up to speed with. I think people probably should be told a little bit of what is a topic in DITA, what are these chunks that you're looking at. Basically shown once, you drag over some text, you either comment or you insert a suggestion, and then you're pretty much good to go. I mean, I would cap it at about an hour's training, I think, and you're really good to go with that. Fully integrated with draft spaces, so exactly that same kind of review tab that you had on the right, that's exactly what shows up in draft space, the editing environment as well. And I won't say it's exactly real time, it's not quite a Google Docs kind of thing, but in a reasonable period of time you get those review comments appearing in your draft space and so on, and you are able to both kind of comment on them and resolve them. Full API, so this doesn't stay kind of locked into our own components. There's a full API to report on all those comments and suggestions and get them out. And they come along with the publication, the topic version, and so on, so you know exactly what they belong to. So again, when I was mentioning earlier that you have metadata on this editorial comments, copy editor is going through suggesting changes, compared with the technical comments. Again, that all comes out through the API, so you kind of slice and dice it and report on it as you need. Excuse me. A quick dedicated timeline on this collector spaces bit. I've got the main roadmap slide coming up later. July, that was when we released Tridion Docs 14 with draft space, so that's out. Q4, looking like early December. Tridion Docs, what we would call Tridion Docs 14 SP1, with that review space I've just talked about, highly scalable feedback and approval with the API, with more in terms of configuration ability also in draft space, and then working towards spring 2020 for an SP2 that adds this feature that we're calling document history. So document history, very detailed view on what's changed, by whom and when. So it's a it's in the draft space, it's in the editing view, it's topic by topic. And if you really need to drill down and see who changed what, kind of if you're going back and auditing, or as an author who really wants to check what's what, and when you're tying up the content, this is available there. So it's going to say, basically it gives you what's changed, and it's highlighted. It's kind of a track changes style view. What's changed, who did it, and when did they do it? Exactly like that. So that's some of the flashy stuff. This is a bit kind of under the hood, still very, very important. Just a few of some of the architectural enhancements. I'm not going into great detail. Again, I think we'll be setting up some web sessions, perhaps towards the end of the year, early next year, to go into a bit more depth on this kind of stuff. But just as a quick preview, working on translation, connectivity, and context. So first of all, the review space that I just showed. By SP2 in the spring, we also want to make that available in target languages. So your in-country reviewers can use that same kind of review interface, comment on what's there, and so on. So traditionally, that would have been done via PDF. And again, you get the problems of lots of different comments coming in. It's not centralized. You can't report on it. So getting that into review space as well. And just to set expectations, we're not at this point planning to also get the target languages editable in draft space, because that just creates so many workflow problems there. So purely the review space for target languages. And also, of course, language cloud support. So I hope everybody's had the chance to learn about language cloud in these couple of days. So integrating that is very high on our priorities. The next one, which I'm calling Move to Web Client 2.0, we need to get a better name for this thing. By the time it comes out, it's going to have a better name. But what we are calling Web Client 2.0. And again, this is not quite the flashy stuff, not yet, but it paves the way for some of the flashier stuff. So if you've been using Tridion Docs for a while, you should be familiar with the web client, the place where you do a lot of the kind of administration, you edit the folders, you're doing kind of workflow reports, you're doing translation stuff and so on. It's done a really good job over the years, and it has been quite over the years by now. And it needs a refresh under the hood, to be honest. It's older code, it's not bad, but we need to kind of rework the whole thing in a much more modern paradigm. And it's just one of those things that you have to knuckle down and get done. It's going to improve a number of things, generally improve performance, configurability, upgradability, all sorts of good stuff. And then it's going to be all with the modern kind of UX. So again, it's looking a little bit dated. So we're going to get that modern UX that Adolfo was talking about, for example. And you understand, of course, once we have this new thing, it becomes so much more efficient to be developing new features on top of this. So that by the time we see the web client 2.1, 2.2, 2.3, that's when we'll really start to see some new interesting features coming into the web browser. So, and I'm not going into huge detail on this, but just this general sense, we're hearing the feedback that people are telling us to say, you still have thick clients, they're good, but we want to be able to do more stuff in the browser, or we want our subject matter experts to have more power, and so on and so on. So this is the direction that we are going into. And it doesn't happen overnight, but we're moving. And finally, we've done a lot of work on making upgrades easier already, and I hope some people got the chance to see Dave's talk on Tuesday about automating some of this stuff. So it's it's way better than it used to be, well worth taking advantage of what we do have with this remote and so on. But we want to take this further. So partly you get this with the new web clients, that as we rebuild it, you get fewer and fewer of those config files to kind of manually check and merge and update, and it all gets more centralized. We can also go further outside of the new web clients to consolidate those files really into into a small set of configuration files which don't change from upgrade to upgrade. So the idea is these are your files, these specify all of your custom stuff that you're doing, and you can simply reapply the new version of Tridion Docs and it will make it like you're used to with all of your settings and so on. And then also, the thick client tools are there. They're going to be there for a while, and making it easier to upgrade and deploy those as well, getting that a bit more centralized, because that has been a bit of a task that used to need to go around to people's workstations and stuff and make sure they're all upgraded. So centralizing this as well. So a quick preview into some of the work that we're doing there. How are we doing for time? Doing okay. So back into the kind of flashier stuff. I can't stay on the architecture for too long. I needed some more flashy stuff. This is really kind of expanding on what I was talking about briefly in Adolfo's keynote yesterday, where you saw kind of some features, and you may have been wondering about kind of knowledge graphs, how does this all fit in, what's happening, and so on. So this is a kind of a vision, I would say, for the next kind of 2 to 3 years, gradually building in these capabilities to make something that nobody has really done before in a CMS for some reason. Nobody has truly built a semantic CMS that uses this knowledge graph technology. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's see where we are now. So Tridion Docs, Tridion overall, really fits into more and more of an enterprise ecosystem. When prospects are coming to us, when existing customers are coming into us and wanting to expand what they're doing, we're more and more hearing that we need to connect with other systems in the enterprise. This is really important. So it's no longer necessarily just an isolated team using this tool on its own and exporting kind of PDFs or something like that. It's very much in that wider ecosystem, which is great because people are getting more value out of the tool. But there are challenges with doing this, clearly. When you do these kind of ad hoc integrations, it's easy enough often to kind of pump out content from one system into another based on certain criteria. Problem is, how do you understand that content once it gets there? It kind of lacks a lot of context. Who created it? What permissions does it have on? What else is dependent on this? And all of this kind of stuff. Even when you take that chatbot use case, to say the chatbot is kind of pulling out snippets of content, well, it's really difficult for the chatbot to understand, to match the user's intent to the content, unless it understands truly a bit more about the content. What does it actually mean? You've also got, as I was talking about, duplicated content problems, various systems. You might have various systems where you can create content and it's inconsistent and people are creating things that have already been made. Also in terms of workflows, manual workflows, and you may be misrouting stuff or kind of going through a lot of emails to get stuff to the right place, which generally this whole picture paints a picture of not ideal governance, if you like. It would be much better to automate more things. So this is a kind of a picture of the current state. Clearly I'm painting it a little bit kind of, people are doing some great integrations already and it's kind of impressive and always great to learn about. And of course with Tridion Docs we always try to make those extension points available so that you can indeed kind of plug in your own stuff. The kind of the AI-write plugins for email triggers and all of this kind of stuff. So it is happening. But it is kind of always a little bit more custom than we would like to do such things. And so you see this gap. So I'm painting a picture of all these kind of external systems, whether it's external content creation systems, external data systems, master data management, taxonomies, whatever. And then in terms of consumption, delivery to various different platforms, mobile devices, chatbots, or it might be kind of outputting to your system of record if that's another document management system. And so currently every integration you do with like that has to be a piece of custom work. And we think we can do a bit better here. So this is really diving into saying, if you want to do this instead of on an ad hoc basis and in a really systematic and kind of future-proof way, you have to get to the grips. You have to let the machines think in a similar way to the way that we do in terms of the semantic networks, as Carmen was showing us yesterday. So there is this idea of knowledge graphs. I strongly encourage you to go, if this is not a familiar term, the knowledge graph, you go and Google it, and there's a lot of really interesting writing. Go and Google who's using them these days. You see kind of Amazon, all sorts of big companies are really getting into this knowledge graph technology. So it's a kind of a mainstream thing, mainstream at least, but not in CMSs. So this is why we want to be the first here. And the knowledge graph, very simplistic kind of view, but essentially it's connecting these kind of entities in the real world with relationships and so on, and so that you're able to kind of make these inferences between different dependent items. And at the end of the day, because you're modeling the way that we actually think in a very explainable way, it's not like kind of the totally black box approach, this is much more reliable. So if you're using it to drive an auto-tagging system, like what I showed, you can trace right back to say, well, this tag was applied here. Why was it applied? Why was this suggested? And you can do that. You can trace right back. You can say, this is my taxonomy here. I can see why this was done, and I can tweak the system if I need to. So how does that all fit in? So basically the idea of adding a semantic layer around here. So a semantic layer based on graph databases, based on standards-based taxonomies, which use underlying the same kind of technology, so RDF and everything. I gave probably a bit of a lecture last year on all of that. I'm not sure if some people remember. But really, it's similar technology. So when you say semantics, when you say semantic technology, it's the same as kind of modern taxonomies. So SCARS, RDF, all of these things are important things to look up. And so using this to drive various kind of applications. So we've said we need all these connectors, we need a smart tagger, we need something to help us analyze what's already reused, what's duplicate content, something to tell us what are the dependencies between different pieces of content. We've got people, for example, who are importing a lot of external rules and regulations. And every time one of those external rules and regulations changes, it has a knock-on impact to all of their own content. And they need to check it, and they need to republish. And currently, it's quite a manual process. So giving people the ability, with a graphical tool eventually, to say, I'm building these relationships, and I want to get an alert every time one of these things changes, or even that I want to automatically batch republish all of these dependent items when something externally changes. So that's really a vision of the future, and as I say, it's just a short session today, but we'll be doing some web sessions to share what we're working on in more detail in the coming months. Just bringing things back to the kind of the short term, something else that we're hearing a lot about is the need for kind of greater reporting in general from Tridion Docs, and particularly focused on the idea of reuse. It seems to be a big pain point that, you've got this very powerful system. Kind of your gut feeling is we're saving a lot of time and money through content reuse here, but you don't have any numbers on it. And of course, people are asking you to justify the cost of the system and everything, and you need to surface some numbers to do that. And even to look to say, can you improve your efficiencies in the future? So we can see here, and again, another plug for the SDL community. I mean, really do use it. There's some good conversations going on there. And we've got people asking about how do I find reuse metrics? What's the best approach and so on. It's both on the technical level and also on the kind of conceptual level. How do I even define reuse in the first place? So we've put together kind of this proof of concept. To jump ahead a little bit, the idea is to productize a kind of a reporting framework with not only reuse but other relevant metrics. But we started with a little proof of concept around reporting on reuse specifically. We made some assumptions, of course. We simplified things to just get going with this proof of concept. So for example, we counted reuse only as reusing topics, which I think for some people might actually turn out to be a fair assumption, because I think increasingly people are seeing things like concept references as more of a kind of an accuracy tool rather than kind of a bulk reuse thing. But it would be up to yourselves, At the end of the day, we want to get a configurable tool out there which works with your definition of reuse. But for now, we made these assumptions. We said it's topic by topic reuse. And we worked on new publications only. So we're cutting out a vast swathe of content there. This is, again, just to get moving with a proof of concept. And this is on our own internal docs repository that we were doing this. We made some assumptions on effort and cost. We knew that, we didn't want managers. This is intended to be like a management dashboard at the end of the day. And you want to get figures directly there without forcing people to do a bunch more calculations in Excel or whatever it is. So we made some assumptions on effort and cost, typical kind of industry figures, although that worked out amusingly for us, as you'll see. And to be quite honest, there were a lot of manual steps in this. It took a while. We had to kind of do various steps to get the data out, and there was kind of consolidating outside the system and so on. So typical proof of concept type stuff, just proving, can this work? Is it a valid kind of approach? And I think we found it is. So we managed to get the data out and visualize it in these kinds of ways. So at the back, it's going to be pretty hard to see this, but this is actually, each of these is a year. So these are the years that we've been producing our documentation, broken also into quarters. It's very interesting because it seems to be cyclical. So first of all, overall, you see there's more activity every 3 months. I haven't got to the bottom of that. Sorry, every 3 quarters, every 9 months. I haven't got to the bottom of it yet. I want to find out exactly why do we have this big effort on new publications every 9 months exactly? I don't know. Anyway, the more important thing is that we've got 2 sets of curves here. Here is the effort in hours, and it's thousands and thousands of hours, is the effort that we'd be putting in if we weren't reusing topics. And here is the effort that we actually are putting in because we are reusing topics. So quite a difference there. This is the report in terms of hours. This was the report in terms of dollar costs. And again, thousands and thousands of dollars saved here. It is just a proof of concept, but I hope this gives you an idea of the potential of a visualization like this. Clearly, we made some assumptions that were not quite right. So we're ending up at a figure of thousands of hours going in. I calculated this means that we have a documentation team of 30 people, which actually is not the case at all. So we got our numbers wrong there somewhere. But I think it's just the principle of the thing to say, yes, it works, and you need to tweak it to your own case. But there's a valid way to report on content reuse. So what are the next steps for this? Clearly working towards properly productizing this. And at the end of the day, you're going to need a kind of a toolkit approach. It's going to need to be configurable to your own needs and requirements. And it does need to go more beyond simple reuse. Perhaps you want to track the length of time that things are staying in review and see if that could be sped up or whatever it may be. So there'll be various use cases around this. So we have to productize this over the next kind of year. And in the meantime, we'll be setting up some work group sessions to share, first of all, our own workings using the IST remote, using an internal kind of a framework, share what we've done and see if you want to use that, but also very much gather feedback on these use cases and understand how would you like to use something like this to really improve the final product that we release. So please do look out once again on the SDL community for news about this. So just wrapping up. So this is the kind of the traditional, rather intimidating roadmap slide. And I'm not going to talk to each of these boxes, you'll be glad to know. So there are two key points here. This is just a little bit of a view into how we're slicing it up internally into thinking about resources. So we've got kind of everything around this kind of browser-based clients, client tools, everything like that. Then we got the kind of underlying technology, content manager, moving into semantics and so on. And then we've got the whole kind of delivery stack here. Okay. And the other point I wanted to mention is that you'll see we're keeping ourselves busy. I hope that's clear. We're moving ahead as fast as we can on this stuff. But I wanted to tie it down to something a bit more concrete in terms of planned releases here. So what that all means, what all those boxes tie up to over the next kind of year and a half, I would say. Tridion Docs 14 SP1 release, which I already talked about, so early December, we're on track for that. With those whole organization reviews, with that configurability and draft space coming out as well. Docs 14 SP2, spring 2020, spring next year. with this document history feature to let authors in draft space see at a very granular level what's been changed by who and when, to kind of audit the content changes in this sense. And plus the in-country reviewing capabilities in review space. So you now open this up to your in-country reviewers so that they can review in target languages, really reviewing the translations as such. You normally wouldn't want those target language reviewers inputting on the actual kind of the content itself. That would hopefully happen a bit earlier on, but it's really reviewing the quality of the translations. Has it all been translated well? So those are a couple of SP releases. And then really pointing towards Tridion Docs 15 and beyond that, but Tridion Docs for 15 for, I would say, early 2021 at the moment. Packed full of some good new stuff. So there's AI-driven tagging suggestions, as I demoed the design preview for yesterday. It's going to take a bit of work to get there. It's not just a couple of months, but we have the basis for getting there, and we think we can do this in this time frame. Certainly productizing the Insights Accelerator, maybe a little bit earlier than this, I would hope, but anyway, at least by this time scale. The knowledge portal features, the enhanced delivery kind of toolkit, out-of-box toolkit, the semantic search, ability to bookmark or create collections, better index and show up external content libraries. Other stuff, I didn't actually mention this, but a new REST API for the content manager. This is overdue as well, something we really need to work on as a secure foundation for further extensibility and integrations. And then that next generation web client, and naming suggestions gratefully received, I would say. We've got to do better than Web Client 2.0.